It's now time for the business news on Sunrise. Coming up, companies with high exposure to government securities get hit on the Ghana Stock Exchange.
Our carbon stocks, it's over there. What we are saying is we must have a local carbon market ourselves, an African carbon market, price our carbon properly.
Also, commercializing Tema oil refineries' idle storage tanks could fetch the company some $2 million a month, an avenue that should be used to revamp the refinery.
We can partner with TOR to get these tanks to operational mode. It's going to be a huge win-win situation, especially for the refinery.
Plus, President of African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, calls for establishment of an African carbon market as a vehicle for development.
You are not measuring our carbon stocks. It's over there. What we are saying is we must have a local carbon market ourselves, an African carbon market, price our carbon properly.
I am Bismarck Ausa. Details shortly. Good morning. To our very first story, companies with high exposure to government securities get hit on the Ghana Stock Exchange. The domestic debt exchange program is having great effect on these entities. Emmanuel Azidizia is an equity research analyst at DataBank.
We saw gains in Société Générale Bank, which gained 21% to end the week at 1.20 pesos per share, and Standard Chartered Bank, which gained 10% to close the week at 65 pesos per share. The gains in these stocks came as Société Générale has a relatively lower exposure to government securities, so was not as affected by the domestic debt exchange program as the other listed banks. Investors are placing bets on some relative macroeconomic stability. We realize that over the past few months, the exchange rate has been relatively stable, which augurs well for the business of consumer goods counters, considering the fact that they import their raw materials to produce their products before they move on to sell. So investors are expecting them to make some decent profits this year, considering the fact that the exchange rate is relatively stable. We expect Société Générale, Standard Chartered Bank, and Farmilk to also continue to post some gains as there's decent demand for their stocks on the stock market.
You heard Emmanuel Azidizia, an equity research analyst at DataBank. Meanwhile, the Ghana Stock Exchange witnessed a decline in capitalization on the last days of trading for the month of August. The following 3 Business Desk report has more.
The GSC Composite Index recorded a notable decline of 14.70 points, concluding at 3,084.79 points.
The market recorded 6 gainers and 3 losers. Société gained some pesos to close at 1 cedi 20 pesos. Unilever also gained some pesos to close at 7 cedis 40 pesos. Other gainers were Benzo Oil Palm, Stanchart, SIC, and Farmilk. Cal Bank led the losers, losing a peso to close at 61 pesos per share. Goil also lost some pesos to close at 1 cedi 57 pesos, whilst MTN lost 5 pesos to close at 1 cedi 45 pesos per share.
Despite this, the index remains resilient with a robust year-to-date return of 26.22% amidst challenges. This performance indicates continued investor interest and confidence in the market. Meanwhile, the collective market capitalization experienced a decline of 159.83 million cedis, reaching 73.25 billion cedis. This movement in market capitalization was largely driven by performances of individual stocks.
When the market capitalization of a company declines, it simply means that the share price of the company has dropped, and in this case, it reduces the value of the company on the market, and hence market capitalization is declined.
The Financial Stocks Index showed a different picture as it saw an increase of 47.62 points to conclude at 1,756.12 points.
And that was a 3 Business Desk report. Moving on, an energy analyst and chief executive of Eureka Energy Solutions, Dr. Yusuf Suleimana, is urging management of Tema Oil Refinery to commercialize the company's storage capacity. He noted that the money from such activity could be plowed back into the refinery for its core mandate of refining crude oil for the domestic market. According to the Eureka Energy Solutions boss, commercializing TOR's storage tanks will rake in some $2 million a month.
Data available to Eureka proves that with a little investment, about $3 million USD, they can commercialize, they can bring back these idle tanks into operational mode, and that could fetch the refinery closer to $2 million US on a monthly basis. Any commercial partner who can partner with TOR to get these tanks to operational mode, it's going to be a huge win-win situation, especially for the refinery. So now that the core business is still in inertia, awaiting to have a concrete deal sealed to get the refinery back to business. We have a huge pool of importers within the space, and I think storage is one of the bottlenecks for these importers. I urge TOR to open up, to get strategic partners who can invest into these tanks that are idle, to bring them back to operational mode. And I think it's going to be a huge win-win situation for the two partners, especially for TOR, that is struggling to meet some basic requirement in terms of utility bills, some statutory payments to staff.
Dr. Yusuf Suleimana is energy strategist and CEO of Eureka Energy Solutions. President of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, has called for the establishment of an African carbon market as a vehicle for development. The European Union markets put premium value of products that have less carbon footprints and offer high prices for these goods. This means companies have to invest and use more renewable solutions in their production processes. The African Development Bank prefers to focus on the continent's promise, notably of how to better harness its assets from its massive natural resources wealth to its large and young workforce to fight climate change, invest in sustainable development, and enhance the growth of economies.
Then the GDP is just a measure of value of goods and services and economic produces. But you are not measuring our carbon stocks. It's over there. What we are saying is we must have a local carbon market ourselves, an African carbon market, price our carbon properly, and make sure then that our GDP takes into consideration, it's adjusted based on the positive externality we have. Then the value of our GDP, if it takes into consideration the value of our forest, the carbon stock and so on, will be so high that our debt to GDP ratio will go down. Then we can borrow more money to do all the things that we are talking about, green financing, that we are saying here today.
And that was President of African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, speaking at the African Youth Climate Assembly under the theme African-Led Solutions to Global Challenges. Reminded this is still the business news on Sunrise. To some other story, the Ghana Agricultural Workers Union, GAU, has alerted implementers of the Planting for Food and Jobs to address smuggling of inputs meant for the program. General Secretary of GAU, Edward Karewe, has observed curbing smuggling of the inputs is key in the success of the Phase 2 of the Planting for Food and Jobs program.
If we have a situation where within the period of the implementation of the Planting for Food and Jobs program, fertilizer became very, very scarce, the prices escalated beyond the reach of farmers, smuggling was so high to the extent that even animals were encouraged to participate in the smuggling. And the example was given by them that donkeys were carrying the fertilizer across the border unaided by human beings. That cannot be a good story for the Planting for Food and Jobs.
That was General Secretary of General Agricultural Workers Union, Edward Karewe there. Before we go, a look at how the city is faring against major trading currencies and how some key commodities are faring on the global market.
On the interbank foreign exchange market, where banks trade amongst themselves, The dollar gained 1 peso and it's selling at 11 cedis 3 pesos. The British pound recorded no price change, selling at 13 cedis 88 pesos. The euro is selling at 11 cedis 89 pesos. It lost 6 pesos. However, be guided that these figures will be higher at a forex bureau near you. On the global commodities market, price of cocoa is down by 0.91%, selling at $3,605 per ton. Price of Brent crude oil is up by 1.98%, selling now at about $89 per barrel, while the price of an ounce of gold is down by 0.01%, selling at $1,940.
This has been the business news on Sunrise with me, Bismarck Awusa. For more business stories, please log on to 3news.com. Sports is up next.